RedLetterMedia Tackle with Craig Norris, PhD. So here we are for another week, looking at everything in and around the world of pop culture, media, discussions, some fun stuff, some weird stuff. And today's topic, we're going to just survey some interesting news material that I've come across, some unusual oddities, some intriguing stuff, hopefully that you'll find interesting to listen to here on a Friday afternoon. So the first thing that came across my desk, interestingly, was out of Saudi Arabia. So the website The Gamer surveys material around video gaming material. Headlines: Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman owns basically all of SNK now. SNK, one of the big video game companies in Japan. So it turns out that now he has 96% of the Japanese game developer SNK under his control. Why would a Saudi prince be buying up Japanese video game companies like this? So, a few years ago, the article goes on to talk about how a few years ago, Electronic Gaming Development Company, itself a subsidiary of Mohammed bin Salman's foundation, started by buying the 36% stake in SNK, and then that grew and grew, and now 2 years later, he has pretty much become the single biggest owner, shareholder of the SNK company at 96%. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see where this goes. I mean, to quote the press release, it says the Mohammed bin Salman Foundation investment in the Japanese company SNK reinforces its continuous commitment to its goals of empowering Saudi men and women through building economic powerships within the foundation's updated strategies to maximize the positive impact of youth empowerment. Sounds very positive, but some commentators, a number of articles I've looked at, have raised some red flags around this, pointing out that this seems like an attempt by various wealthy individuals in Saudi Arabia to purchase, what could be considered maybe soft power to address some of the various political, moral concerns around them. So a number of articles have flagged how controversial figures such as the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is in terms of the alleged involvement in the assassination of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. A number of articles, flagged that Saudi Arabia might be using the money it's pumping into various popular entertainment figures such as Justin Bieber, sports events such as the Formula One, to try and present a more positive image of itself than the human rights record many people have criticized it as having. So, for instance, the interesting article that came in from CBC Radio was talking about how the Canadian Director of Human Rights Watch has said that the upcoming Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, featuring a performance by Canadian pop sensation Justin Bieber, is an attempt by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to whitewash his human rights record. So the concern by some is that now the purchase of SNK over in Japan, which has produced many popular Japanese video games, could be an extension of this attempt for Saudi Arabia to try and, a political economy perspective might be to diversify their economic holdings. But interestingly, why are they investing in popular entertainment? Justin Bieber, the SNK video game company in Japan, Formula One. What type of power do they hope that linking their financial funding to that might lend? Maybe it's purely economy, that they see these as generating a lot of financial revenue. Or is there something else there that they're hoping that some of the popular interest, entertainment directed towards these figures, Justin Bieber, Formula One, the SNK video company, will also rub off in Saudi Arabia. Interesting. Looking at, while we're on, I guess, the idea of panics or controversies around media, that was media ownership. What happens when the media you love is owned by a morally questionable source? Here we have this interesting story from the Japanese video game Guilty Gear. This is a newer version of a Guilty Gear Strive, where the video game website Niche Gamer headlines, Guilty Gear Strive added Bill Clinton years after he condemned the series. So this article goes on to talk about how back in 1999, Bill Clinton took aim at Guilty Gear, as well as a number of other Japanese video games at that time, as being a bad influence on young kids. Actually, let's listen to Bill Clinton's critique of Guilty Gear and a number of other popular entertainment or video game franchises from that period. So here's a small, short little clip back in 1999 from the then US President Bill Clinton critiquing these video games.
And if you look at some of these ads, it's hard to argue with a straight face that the games were made for adults in the first place. Like the one Arthur mentioned. Advertisements have a particular role here. They have the power to egg children on and lure them in. Every parent knows what response a commercial for sugar cereal or the latest Star Wars toy will get from their children. People advertise because it works. They want that product in one way or the other. They're determined to get it. So we ought to think twice about the impact of ads for so-called first-person shooter video games, like the recent ad for a game that invites players to, and I quote, get in touch with your gun-toting, cold-blooded murdering side. I was given today, Arthur brought me the magazine with the ad that he mentioned, and he was kind enough to mark it for me. There really is a gun here. It says, more fun than shooting your neighbor's cat. I was given another ad that says, what kind of psycho drives a school bus into a war zone? And here's a school bus heavily armed. This came out right after the incident in Springfield, Oregon. Here's an ad that turns the argument I just made on its head. Psychiatrists say it's important to feel something when you kill. And then it goes on to say, you ought to get this technology because it bumps and you feel it. It says, every sensation, every vibration, every mutilation, 9 programmable weapons buttons, customizable feedback software, push the stick that pushes back and feel your pain. And here's one that the most unbelievable of all, it says, kill your friends guilt-free. Now, obviously...
All right, so a little slice of life there back from 1999. Bill Clinton's media panic around, specifically in this case, around advertising, promoting video games aimed at kids, which have lurid, violent details promising, gun-toting, death and so forth. And the one that was linked to Guilty Gear was the last one that he mentions, the last ad saying, kill your friends guilt-free. And of course, this material is really interesting to see in that context in terms of how 10 years, or more than 10 years later, Bill Clinton now, and linked to the Guilty Gear game, has, it turns out from fans as they were playing this Guilty Gear latest update, come across what they think is a reference back to that 1990 speech. So in this new update to the game, there's a new level that was called White House Reborn, and it recreates the Oval Office. And in that Oval Office, so again, 20 years later from that 1999 critique of the lurid hyperbole that advertising, I guess, was prone to do for video games in the late 90s, we have a picture, this portrait of Bill Clinton that many people came across. And now, through a bit of forensic fandom, fans have said, look, this can't be a coincidence that the presidential portrait that's in the Oval Office in the Guilty Gear Strive game is Bill Clinton. 20 years, it's a slow burn, I guess, as Shakespeare says, you know, revenge is a dish best served cold. That was a 20-year payoff to critique Bill Clinton within the game, that he was complaining that would lead kids, or at least prey upon kids' negative imagination. So, yeah, intriguing. So on a more positive note, possibly, there's some interesting news coming out from Lego, the popular building bricks, but Lego linked, specifically in this case, first story linked to Star Wars, the latest Lego game, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. Cracked.com picks up the idea that it might fix a problem with the sequel trilogy. This was the latest J.J. Abrams sequel trilogy. And in particular, the problem the article goes on to flag is the controversy around some of the relationships between characters that formed, and the fact that the kind of budding relationship that many fans saw between the character of Poe and Finn was really dampened by the Rise of Skywalker film, that it really didn't explore what many fans saw as you know, a possible, really genuine relationship between two male protagonists in the film, that they might fall in love. And there's a number of scenes. So in the Lego scene, many people are kind of praising. There's a while it's in the opening credits, I think, for the game, there's a bit of biffo between characters, and Poe comes to the rescue of Finn and embraces him within this Lego kind of animation that many people are praising as doing more for being a positive representation of these two characters' love, which was cut off tragically in the film. It was never explored. It was just dropped. That the Lego game seems to be enabling fans to better, I guess, realize that relationship. What's interesting about the article is, so it talks a bit about how fans were relationshipping Poe and Finn in a way that the movie didn't go, right? So the movie really, the trilogy, the new trilogy, didn't really explore or kind of confirm that Poe and Finn are going to have a relationship. Instead, it really dampened it. There was really no kind of representation that they could hold on to. Anyway, the article goes on and then points to a number of one specific YouTube clip that points out how the actor for Poe, Oscar Isaac, in many interviews kind of teases his own shipping, teases his own desire for that faux Finn and Poe relationship to occur. Let's have a little listen to actor Oscar Isaac talking about how he sees their relationship. And again, you can read into that the idea that he is wanting the directors in the Star Wars space to explore same-sex relationships within the Finn and Poe relationship.
The subtextual stuff is a bit more fun to play. There is a deep, deep connection between the two of them. There's a deep, deep connection between me and John. And I think that ended up working out really well because, particularly in the new film, we get to work together a lot. You really get to see Finn and Poe figuring stuff out together. They're on missions together. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's tension. There's fights as people that are very close have now and then. Ultimately, they believe in each other, and they're a team, along with Ray, who's the MVP. And the truth is, as a performer, you know, I can only do so much because I don't get to write the scripts. But other than say, I would think that would be a great way for the story to go in a much more original one. But I think that at least what we can say is that it holds that potential. Really, there could have been.
All right, so yeah, the YouTube clip goes on for longer. It's worth tracking that down. So if you go to crack.com, there's a nice little article talking about the latest Lego movie, Lego game, Lego Star Wars, the Star Wars saga, and tracking down that YouTube. What's fun about that YouTube clip is the fan that put it together puts these nice subtitles in acknowledging Oscar Isaac's subtext around what the fan is teasing out as the type of narrative possibility that he is hinting at between a Finn-Poe relationship that's not explored. And there's some wonderful subtitles the fans added there, as well as the supercut, I guess, of interviews Oscar Isaac gave promoting the various Star Wars films as they were being launched, but sneaking in the idea of a Finn-Poe relationship subtly and kind of cleverly. So worth checking out. The other interesting bit of news from Lego came out, was reported in the reviewgeek.com website, headlined "Lego and Epic team up to build the only metaverse that matters." Yeah, so Lego and Epic Games, best known for creating Fortnite, Epic Games that is, there's been an announcement that they've joined forces to develop this thing called the Lego Metaverse, which the article goes on to say is a game or maybe an online community that will be designed from the outset with the well-being of kids in mind. It goes on to talk about how both Lego and Epic Games see themselves at the forefront of gaming, music creativity, and social collaboration. I guess through Epic Games' Fortnite, one of the biggest, massive first-person shooter games. So the article goes on to speculate that what Lego and Epic might be wanting to create here with their Lego Metaverse is maybe a challenger to Roblox, right? Roblox, an enormously successful kind of building, crafting game. You know, think of Minecraft, but add within it, kind of Fortnite-y, I guess, type dimension, mini games. You know, there's a ton of creativity, users creating their own games within it, and a very active kind of buying and selling space as well. So it might be that Lego Metaverse, is trying to create a competitor for Roblox, trying to set up a similar crafting scheme with Epic Games. Be very interesting to watch. I mean, Roblox has been a space of some controversy because of the fact that its primary user base are young kids or teenagers, and within that, concerns around the type of creativity that they're allowing kids to do and the type of exploitation that might be going on there. You know, Roblox's own exploitation of that talent. So to see how Lego Metaverse might navigate that will be interesting to see. Certainly Roblox, I think, for those that have not come across it, is an enormously successful space, but one probably deserving more scrutiny and attention. So Lego Metaverse. Now I want to turn to fan theories. Fan theories, I always love fan theories. Whenever a fan theory story pops up, I always enjoy reading over it. This one, again from crack.com, headlines: Disney bent over backwards to disprove a gruesome Star Wars fan theory. Star Wars fan theory, of course, Star Wars has had tons of crazy fan theories. My favorite being Jar Jar Binks was actually a Sith Lord. But others like C-3PO being an Imperial spy, Force doesn't really exist. Anyway, tons of fan theories. These are theories that fans have when they watch it and they think, actually, there's an explanation for this, which I don't think anyone else has been able to come across. In this case, it's a fan theory about the third movie, Return of the Jedi, and the fact that at the I guess one of the major set pieces for Return of the Jedi is the battle on Endor, where you have the cute Ewoks battling against the Imperial forces, the stormtroopers, with the help of Luke Skywalker and the Rebel Alliance, Han Solo and others. So within that battle, we have at the end a scene where everyone's celebrating on Endor when the Ewoks have defeated the Empire with the rebels. And we have this scene with everyone celebrating and singing, and we have these helmets, stormtrooper helmets that are being used as drums. And, there's fan theories around the fact that, hey, what happened to all the stormtroopers that were in those uniforms? They don't seem to be here. And it's established earlier in Return of the Jedi that the Ewoks seem to be cannibals, right? They capture Luke and Han and Chewbacca and C-3PO and R2-D2 and they're stringing them up and they're roasting them. They're about to roast them, right? So the idea is that, wow, maybe the Ewoks ate all the stormtroopers, right? A really grisly idea. And maybe that's what's being prepared for the celebration dinner at the end of Return of the Jedi. That's the fan theory, that the Ewoks ate the stormtroopers at the end of the movie. Turns out, Star Wars, through Disney's cartoon series, Star Wars Forces of Destiny, which is a YouTube cartoon series, made a real effort to address that fan theory. Let's have a short listen to the scene from Star Wars Forces of Destiny where they tackle this fan theory that the Ewoks ate all the stormtroopers head on. So picture this. You're at the end of Return of the Jedi. This scene details Han and Chewie looking on as the Ewoks are tying up some stormtroopers, right? Then they're putting them on the kind of poles, just like Han and Chewie were put on poles at the start of Return of the Jedi. Anyway, so they're gazing on this, and let's listen to the dialogue.
You think we should let him?
Should let them what?
Leia, we were just...
Letting the Ewoks cook the enemy?
We just got here.
Well, were you going to stop them?
Of course. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Look, who am I to interfere?
Please let them go. We must treat the enemy fairly. Hey! Clearly, the Ewoks are hungry. Go to General Syndulla's camp and find a crate of ration sticks we can offer them. I'll make sure the stormtrooper stays safe.
Great. I know what that's gonna cost me. This better be worth it.
Alrighty, so sets up this idea, and the next 2.5 minutes basically detail Han and Chewie being able to grab some kind of ration sticks from the rebel soldiers to feed the Ewoks because they're really hungry, so they don't eat the Imperial troops. Wow. But it really fascinates me that Star Wars under Disney made a big effort in one of their YouTube cartoon specials to tackle head-on the fan theory. So obviously the Star Wars people, showrunners involved in this series, were aware of this fan theory and thought this is not going to stand, that they're going to place as canon the fact that the Ewoks did not eat the stormtroopers. Han and Chewie got them some food sticks, some rations to eat. So, you can rest calmly as you're watching Return of the Jedi, and that question comes up about the Ewoks eating the stormtroopers. You can say, well, no, look at episode... what is it? The Star Wars Force of Destiny and Imperial Feast episode on YouTube. There you go. That might come up in the trivia event. Moving on now to really unusual thing way back from the, I think this series is from the 80s, Quantum Leap. I loved it when it was on television. Quantum Leap details the main character basically kind of time jumping into the bodies of other people to help them address a challenge in their life, help them to overcome something. And yeah, it's a really feel-good series, drama TV series from the US. And recently I was listening to an interview with the showrunner for it, who was talking about how important it was to keep this very fantasy-based idea of kind of time travel and jumping into the bodies of people to then correct the course their life was taking for the better. The main character does this. So the showrunner talking about how important it was to keep that realistic. So I want to play a little snippet from that interview. It sets up by saying, within this fictional universe, would the US government in this future that the quantum leap thing was being invented be happy with the money they spent on this? And so Donald P. Bellisario, the showrunner for Quantum Leap, talks about his view on that, but then he moves to some really interesting points about his rules for keeping this fantasy drama realistic.
Defining the near future, why does everyone wear glowing lights?
Well, it was the future, so you had to have something glowing, like here in front of me now. And in the very first episode, Sam's accoutrement, I had some part of it glowing and flashing.
We know Al spends much of his time covering for Sam, but when or if the details ever got out, would the Quantum Leap project be considered a success?
Would the government see it as a success? Well, they kept financing it, so it had to be successful to the government on some level. Al was very good at raising funds from Congress, and he had to explain Quantum Leap to them on a level they could understand. And he had to put out some teasers that in Quantum Leap uncover something that would be very positive for the government and for the country. He kept on that track when he met with Congress, and that's how he got the money. He was a good talker.
For $43 billion, he could at least have altered the results of the last presidential election.
I didn't tell any stories where he would radically change history, because we know what goes on in history, and that would have been as if the show was a pure fantasy, which I didn't want the audience to feel that way. I wanted the audience to feel that there really was Sam out there leaping through time.
So I think that's a really interesting point, that the idea that it was going to be leaping through time, and here the idea again that what we're listening to here is in Quantum Leap, the 80s series that dealt with being able to time jump into other people's bodies to help their life proceed in a positive way. The showrunner, Donald P. Bellisario, is talking about how he kept that realistic, how he kept that idea of the fantasy of the show realistic. And so one of the rules he had was that Sam doesn't jump into a famous person, that instead it's a very normal, everyday person. Let's listen to what he says next.
There were certain things he could only leap into people that were ordinary. That was what we started off with, that rule, which I broke a couple of times later in the show. The reason he could only leap into his own lifetime was to make the show believable. I didn't want it one day he'd leap into Rome in Caesar's time. I didn't want that. I wanted every show to feel like it could really happen, and that's why it had to be contemporary.
What kind?
So I think that's again, that really interests me in terms of that suspension of disbelief. One of those key ideas within telling a good drama or comedy story, that you're able to keep the audience's disbelief suspended. And when an audience watches it, they're going to unpack the text, just like we saw with the Ewoks eating the Imperial Stormtroopers theory, right? That a fan watches Return of the Jedi, sees the Stormtrooper helmets at the end, and assumes, well, the Ewoks have already been shown to want to eat our heroes. what was going to stop them eating the stormtroopers? So surely they went ahead and ate the stormtroopers. And again, that's classic realism theory. So again, many theorists have pointed out the three components of kind of, I guess, fact-checking films. The first one being that all links and relationships between the story that we're watching or reading or listening to is clear and logical, right? So in Quantum Leap, the idea being that we know what the future is, so a storyteller within Quantum Leap that's going to be doing time travel doesn't want to make the relationships that we know have been established somehow skew out by having a famous person do something. So instead, again, the showrunner selecting just everyday people to focus on made the kind of clear, logical progression of time more easy, as well as within Star Wars with the Ewoks, the fan theorists saying, well, clearly Ewoks will eat people and the stormtroopers will be eaten. Second point being that the narrative follows the basic laws of cause and effect. Finally, that every element is there for the purpose of helping make sense. Nothing is extraneous or accidental. I love that last point, that everything there's for purpose, which I think is where that forensic fandom comes in. Why were the stormtroopers, why were the Ewoks playing stormtrooper helmets at the end of Return of the Jedi? Well, they're trying to figure that out. What's the cause and effect between seeing this empty helmet? Is it that the Ewoks ate the stormtroopers? So again, it's this nice, it's absolutely normal and rational to have fan theories about movies, and it can show some really interesting heavy lifting about the realism that is portrayed in these films, particularly when they're more fictional and fantastic. One of the things about watching, I guess, fantasy films, the Star Wars films or Quantum Leap, is that there's realism there, and that realism is even more relevant to these fantasy dramas because their actions and abilities that we see within them have to conform to the laws of cause and effect really cleverly. They have to be related logically to other elements of the narrative and work according to what many theorists, Belsi, has said is a recognizable system. Right? So then the fans will start talking about their theories within that system. Showrunners will attempt to create the logic within the system, right? So rules governing who the character of Sam will jump into in Quantum Leap. That it won't be a famous person, that it will be, as much as possible, a kind of normal person. Although, let's listen, Donald P. Paliso, the showrunner for Quantum Leap, goes into an interesting thing about one episode he did which broke that rule.
What kind of challenges did you face in producing a show that relied heavily on guest actors?
The show was an opportunity to use a lot of actors. I never found that to be a challenge. I found it to be an opportunity. I like the idea of being able to pull different actors in from the acting pool. The stories that we at home 18 years or 20 years before.
How controversial was it to produce the Lee Harvey Oswald episodes?
First of all, when I created the show, I wanted to use ordinary people, because if you use ordinary people, you're not changing history with somebody famous. But I got to the point where I wanted to do Lee Harvey Oswald because I had served with Lee Harvey Oswald in the Marine Corps, and I knew Lee Harvey Oswald. There were so many stories about multiple shooters and multiple people behind it that I believed that Lee Harvey was the only guy that did it, and I knew that his type would react that way. So I decided to do the show. That episode was a little different for me because I started the same way I do any episode. I just start writing and something comes out. But here I knew I was going to use Lee Harvey Oswald, and I knew that he was going to kill Kennedy in his lifetime, so I had to work around all that. It was an interesting episode to write, dealing with somebody who actually lived and killed the presidents.
Was the Evil Leaper storyline?
So it's worth listening to that interview in full depth. That is from the ArsTechnica website, headlined Unsolved Mysteries, Quantum Leap's Don Bellisario on the fate of Sam Beckett, the man who came up with Sam, Al, and Ziggy, dishes on the show and what happened next. So if you're a fan of Quantum Leap, check that out. It's a really interesting show to listen to. And the last bit I want to show is from a group on YouTube, RedLetterMedia. They do kind of pop culture discussion. They do movie reviews. They create their own shorts. They're most famous for doing movie reviews that go for longer than the movie themselves that they're analyzing. The Star Wars ones, Star Trek ones are kind of famous for doing these mixed storytelling film reviews crossed with kind of gonzo, bizarre story within it. Anyway, here they're talking about the Star Trek Picard Season 2. The reason why I want to show this is, again, this idea of the challenge of creating realistic stories, and how even if you're watching a fantasy show like Star Trek or Star Wars, in this case Star Trek, science fiction, you've got to make sure you keep to the rules of creating realism. And when you don't, fans are going to start taking it apart. So in this scene, this is their review of Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 4 and 5. They're talking about one specific character and asking, what the heck is this character? What is this character's background? It doesn't seem this character makes sense. The actor appeared in Season 1, but now she's in Season 2 playing a different role. Why have they cast her? And it's really fun in terms of just listening to the theories that the two hosts from RedLetterMedia unpack in terms of explaining what it is. The first few theories are diegetic, that is, they're explaining why this actor is cast in this role because of the story. And then the final one is extra diegetic, that it has something to do with the actual contract the actor has.
Are we ever going to get an answer as to why the Watcher looks just like Laris? Or is that just a coincidence? Is there going to be a good reason for that? Is Laris from Picard's time? Is she the Watcher? Like, has she always been the Watcher?
Well, no.
And this is just Watcher in the past, that she doesn't know that 500 years later she's going to be posing as a Romulan interacting with Picard.
It is Laris's ancestor.
You think it's Laris's ancestor?
That's answer one.
Okay.
You don't know, do you?
Who eventually stops being a Watcher, flies over to Romulus, marries a Romulan man and has a baby, and then 27 generations later, Laris looks just like her great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Or Picard sees the Watcher as Laris because he's in love with her.
Oh, that's a possibility.
But he's racist because he doesn't really like Romulans. So he sees her as a human.
No.
That's possibility 2. Possibility 3 is they signed actors on and are just like, well, we're paying her for 3 seasons. Just have her be the Watcher. That's option 3. Option 4?
I think she's still the Watcher. For like Season 1, she was the Watcher even then. And she's just watching over old Picard now.
Okay. And she just changes her appearance.
She changes her appearance slightly.
Okay.
As part of her.
We'll wrap it up there. Well, that's RedLetterMedia and their review of Star Trek Picard Episode 2, Episode 4 and 5. Again, a fun way of showing the perils of trying to create realism, suspension of disbelief, the type of forensic fandom you come across all the time on YouTube, as the rules of trying to keep the recognizable system you've set up in your fictional story ticking over and making sense for the fans that are watching it. So we'll leave it there for Media Tackle for another week. Listen in next week for more interesting material. Coming up next is going to be some great music and material from Adrian. This has been Dr. Craig Norris signing off for another week here on Edge Radio. I hope you'll check out some of those interesting shows when you have time.